Hello and welcome to Premier Study in Investing. It's great to have you. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, so you can see this chart below, $30.96. It's March 1st, 2025, and the stock really does not seem to be able to hold $35. It's just been rough. It'll get a little pump and then it'll pretty much give it back. And well, let's review a little bit just to know where we are related to, since we've had earnings come out. There was an earnings miss. It was miss on earnings, beat on revenue. So you can see here, miss on EPS, but an earnings beat. Now, some of the big news has been bird flu, but also some headlines that came in about Moderna slumped 7% on a surprise twist with the RFK Jr. saga. There's some other headlines. Basically, there's a $590 million grant for bird flu that may be being revised or reconsidered. It's probably the better way to say it. Some downgrades. We've been tracking a lot, just not so much the technical analysis, although it does look like we're right here at this purple support line. We've really been looking more at the fundamental analysis since it's not profitable. After earnings came in, they adjusted the book value per share to now $28.24. So since we're just trading right basically $30, it's still at about that 1.1 times multiple, maybe even a little less than 1.1. And then cash per share has dropped now to $18.21. If we look over at the analysts, probably no big changes on earnings for current year 2025. Loss of $10. Yeah, not significantly worse. A little bit worse than the $9 that we were looking at last quarter. So, but that would have been for the prior year. Yeah, EPS a year ago. So, 9.28. Anyways, still not great. I don't even know if it's worth going and looking at some of the debt, but they have about $1.90 of debt per share. And so if we bounce back over to where we're here, you could subtract that off the cash and take you to, like, let's just call it 16.21, and book value would drop to about 26.25. So it's not trading at a great premium. The RSI is interesting, 38.85, and a lot of this stuff is not really that much different. I always like to look at where is this short float. It's now at 12.38%, so it's gone up. It's been at about 10, so 12 is pretty high compared to what we've seen. And the thing that's really interesting to me is that it continues to sell off at these, say, like low 30s numbers. And if you just look at this chart, I mean, you could just think to yourself, like, how many people are selling at a profit? Probably almost nobody, right? I mean, there was some volume that came in here on these low days. This was at 34. So even people that bought this dip, if whoever's selling here, they're still selling at a loss. People that bought here, maybe they sold this run up for $6 on 30 is 20% actually. So like maybe people are trading that and hitting it, and which has been fine to do, especially options. But I want to look a little bit more at the longer term, because as the price continues to drop, mostly it's held by institutions, and so institutions are probably not trading this like crazy. It's 70% owned by institutions. And so, yeah, you probably have some scalpers that are making some money, and that's a strategy that's working for them. But as the price generally tends to come down, still, institutions are selling at losses, because going back multiple years, it was up over $200, over $300, over $400. So, I mean, it's possible that some big institutions bought it during the 2021 run-up, but it seems unlikely that would be the case, that they got in under $30. You know what I mean? I mean, you got to be really, really on the ball to buy this back in 2020 below 30. And then we'll also look at this bird flu thing, because bird flu has been kind of the talk of the town. Although if you just do a quick YouTube search for bird flu, you're going to see that people were talking about it 9 months ago. I mean, they've been talking about it for a while. I will have another clip from former CDC director Robert Redfield, and he is talking about how he thinks bird flu will be the next pandemic, not necessarily because of, evolutionary changes in the virus. Maybe as it went through foxes or cattle or antelope or llamas or something, then it would be close enough. Maybe it could get into monkeys or something, then it could finally jump over into humans. Honestly, if we wait for this to load, the CDC currently in the United States, bird flu and avian flu are synonymous terms. So it's the H5 bird flu. What's going on now? There are no known person-to-person spread at this time, so 0, none, right? And the current public health risk is low. Cases in the United States, 70 cases. Deaths in the United States, 1. If we go down a little bit further, these are confirmed cases, 41. I don't know how since 2024. Okay, so in the last since 2024, so in the last 14 months, 11. So some on the West Coast. It looks like people that work with cattle, poultry farms, other animal exposures, or unknown. Texas. So it has kind of a broad, it's not concentrated in one region in the United States, but this is not a high risk situation. So despite all the hype that we're hearing online, it's not that big a deal based on what I'm seeing right here from the CDC. Okay, so let's check this out here. This is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but this is an article from an individual named Whittney Webb, who's been she's been doing a lot of finance and kind of political YouTube podcasts. And I'll just leave this because it's long. You can see how long this is. It's a fairly long story. But what it is essentially it's one big paper. And I can't believe that these people have the time or the bandwidth to find all these sources and look at all these Twitter accounts and be able to put this together. So obviously, but these are the two individuals, Max Jones and Whittney Webb. So they authored this together, and you can pause and read their bios. Essentially, the idea is that what has happened, just read it. So late last November, President Donald Trump announced that Joe O'Neill as his nominee for Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services, where he would work under Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump's pick for HHS Secretary upon confirmation. So we know Bobby Kennedy Jr. got confirmed. So as Deputy Secretary, O'Neill would essentially function as Chief Operating Officer of the department, overseeing the day-to-day operations of all sub-agencies, as well as leading quote-unquote public health emergency preparedness, which is, i.e., they say, the government's policy responses to bioterror events, pandemics, etc. In addition, O'Neill would oversee the development and clearance of HHS regulations and ostensibly be the main implementer of the Make America Healthy Again policy agency. Built on a promise to eliminate industry capture of public health regulatory agencies and curb the influence of big pharma and big food, Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s MAHA movement played a crucial role in funneling would-be Kennedy voters into the Trump camp. MAHA, in essence, granted the Trump campaign a tinge of populist legitimacy among COVID-era dissidents, which grew out of the shuttering of RFK Jr.'s independent presidential run. So, I mean, essentially what they're saying, in my opinion, is that in order to win the election, they brought in RFK, some of his ideals, in order to, get basically Democrat voters on board. And then what they did was after they got him on, so they paraded him around. That's what I take to be the view of these authors. What did they do? Well, they surround him with basically O'Neill and other types like him, perhaps McCary as well, that are not really going to be helpful to RFK. So they're going to essentially neutralize him. And the rest of the article is about that, tracing this O'Neill guy, his history in big tech, big pharma, the defense sector, and things like this. And so if you're an investor who says, oh, okay, we got our people, and we got the Republicans won, we have Trump, we have Bobby Kennedy, this thing is going to be a slam dunk, and we will not have to, perhaps people would say, we would not have to endure any more of these types of experimental treatments that maybe don't work or questionably work, or we looked at DNA contamination previously, reports that came out of Florida, and I did have people comment and say this is like too political, but I mean I would say this is a political. This has probably more political than ivermectin was, and so that's the story. Jim O'Neill's biotech connections, and then if you're familiar, I don't know much about this author Max, but Whittney Webb, I mean, she pretty much has been very clear about her stance on politics, which is that she tends to be more concerned about big pharma, big tech, surveillance, programmable money, different methods of control that will come through a kind of a cooperation between the military and private organizations like Oracle or Google or whatever, and that really the funding seems to come from the government into these tech companies to develop these products for government surveillance products, data projects, all kinds of stuff. And so basically, not a Republican, not a Democrat, doesn't really trust either side, doesn't think that it would have mattered that much, the outcome of the 2024 election in the United States. That really, to me, it reminds me of, if you've ever read Howard Zinn's The History of the United States of America. It's very, very much about corporations, using lobbyists or other terms in order to basically dictate what happens. And so they don't really care. They're going to donate to both parties. They're going to have their people in, regardless of whoever wins the next 4-year cycle. And I put, personally listening to Whittney Webb, I put her in that type of camp, that she subscribes to those types of things. So interesting article. I mean, you could read all the different, CDC outbreaks and all these different things that they're going to talk about. It's quite long. Like I said, I mean, I'm amazed that anybody really has the ability to do this kind of work, but they're very, serious journalists. I don't even know how they make money on this, but next thing we'll hear from Dr. Robert Redfield. He is the Redfield, probably. He's the former CDC director.
Bird flu, let's hope not. The CDC is now calling for more testing for bird flu at America's farms, sounding alarms after several farm workers contracted the disease from animals. Since 2003, there have been 888 confirmed human cases worldwide. That's according to the CDC. But here's the scary part. Half of those patients died from the disease. Compare that to COVID, in which just 0.6% of people who tested positive actually died. The fear now is that the bird flu is changing, adapting, and could spread to not just birds, but also cattle and pigs, and then eventually spread from human to human. Former CDC Director Robert Redfield, who helped oversee our country's response to COVID, says it is definitely time to take this more seriously. And Dr. Redfield joins me live now. It's always nice to see you, Doctor. I remember you told Chris not long ago that the bird flu could make COVID look like a little pandemic, which was quite alarming. I mean, is that really the case?
Yes, Brian, I really do think it's very likely that we will at some time, it's not a question of if, it's more of a question of when, we will have a bird flu pandemic. And as you mentioned, unfortunately, bird flu has, when it does enter humans, has a significant mortality, probably somewhere between 25 and 50% mortality. So it's going to be quite complicated. Since 2019, we've had a progressive increase in bird flu in chickens and ducks and turkeys in our country. And since then, you've seen it now go into a number of mammals. It's now in over 25 different mammals. I think now with the llamas recently, it's now in 27 mammals in the United States. Why is that important? Is we know exactly what has to happen for bird flu to be infectious for humans and go human to human. Scientists in 2012 actually did experiments in the lab using gain-of-function research, which I'm not in favor of, but the scientists did it, and they figured the 5 amino acids that have to change in the key receptor in order for bird flu to gain a propensity to bind to the human receptor and then be able to go human to human. Something that obviously happened with COVID, where COVID obviously learned how to use the ACE2 receptor in humans and then, of course, became a very infectious virus.
Okay, so once you kind of get to the end of that interview, you realize that his concerns are that there could be a leap from animals to humans related to bird flu, which is really interesting to me because, so like this one says only 4 human infections with low pathogenic avian flu influenza viruses resulting in mild to moderate illness have ever been identified in the United States. So human infections with avian influenza viruses can happen when the virus gets into a person's eyes, nose, or mouth or is inhaled. This is what happens when virus is in the air and droplets or possibly dust. The person breathes it in, possibly when a person touches something that had the virus on it or touches their mouth, eyes, or nose. The spread of avian influenza viruses from one infected person to a close contact is very rare, and when it has happened, it has not led to continued spread among people.
You know, where it was recently described and now is in a significant number of cattle in the United States. I'm concerned about that because cattle live close to pigs, and a lot of times in flu, there's been a relationship of flu going from pigs to humans as it's trying to evolve and gaining the receptors it needs to go human. I'm less concerned, though, that this will happen through spillover and evolution in animals. I'm much more concerned that this will happen in the laboratory.
Okay, make sure you catch that. He's much more concerned it's going to happen in the laboratory rather than in the wild.
Through gain-of-function research.
Okay.
I can create this virus literally in weeks to months by using gain-of-function research. I know exactly what amino acids I have to change because in 2012, against my recommendation, the scientists that did these experiments actually published them. So the recipe for how to make bird flu highly infectious for humans is already out there. All you have to do is look at it.
Subtypes of avian influenza viruses have infected people to cause acute respiratory illness, so H3, H5, H6, H7, H9, and H10 viruses. Among these, so the H5N1 and the H7N9 viruses have caused the majority of infections in people. And more information about bird flu in humans available at the Bird Flu Virus Infections in Human link. Person-to-person spread is none, absolutely zero. So it's like, even I guess if you have like a chicken farmer or someone that works with pigs or something happens to like be around some sick animals and then, rubs whatever droplets into their eyes or something like that they can get it, but person-to-person spread is zero. And that other site said only 4 people in the United States have gotten it. So a little bit conflicted. Maybe this is oversimplified, just data that they're putting up, but you get the general idea of what we're talking about. One thing. Okay, so my next question is, why is Nipah still in the pipeline given the negative profits and the cost cutting of this company? Is this Biodefence? Is this Biodefence? Does this have to do with big tech or Department of Defense? Because Nipah is not a disease that affects people in affluent countries. This is very hard to imagine they're going to make money with this. One thing that's really interesting is if you look on the pipeline for Moderna, they have Nipah virus, which I said, kind of wrote it out before. Oh, this is who's ever even heard of this? Well, here's a bunch of bats. Here's the Nipah virus. So this case fatality rate is estimated 40 to 70%, transmitted to humans from animals such as bats or pigs. So past outbreaks. So this is really interesting. Like, why is Moderna, after they were having these huge cost cuts, decided to keep this in the pipeline? So Nipah virus was first recognized in 1999 during an outbreak among pig farmers in Malaysia. No new outbreaks have been reported in Malaysia since 1999. So 26 years, zero. Okay, since that time. It has been recognized in Bangladesh in 2001. And nearly annual outbreaks have occurred in that country since. So that's sort of interesting. They have it every year. Bangladesh, very poor country. Also very wet. They have a lot of like hurricanes and things like that, based on my friend who used to live there. So I've not visited. I know Dhaka is the capital, but that's about all I know. The disease has also been identified periodically in eastern India, which is very close to Bangladesh. Okay, so other regions may risk for infection is evidenced of the virus has been found in the known natural reservoir, so in bats, and several other bat species in a number of countries, including Cambodia, Ghana, Indonesia, Madagascar, the Philippines, and Thailand. So, human-to-human transmission of Nipah has also been reported. Signs and symptoms. So it's really weird because Moderna primarily sells to Americans. They were talking about expanding, spending some money to try to expand into Taiwan. We knew that there's about 31 billion people that live in Taiwan. But, I mean, these are not developed countries that are going to have like a lot of money to be able to throw at that. So what I think this is, like what we saw from Dr. Robert Redfield, was that, you know, if you want to, I almost feel like I want to hold long out of the money call options on this, just because it seems like he said in the interview, they already did the research, gain of function research, on how to make it transmissible. That is, we're going back to bird flu now, not Nipah. I don't know what to say about Nipah, and if anyone's done the work on how to, you know, why would you even want to do that? But as he said, related to bird flu or avian flu, the work has been done, it's been published, and there's already like a recipe for anybody that wants to, say, do any biological warfare. So, at the same time, like we saw before, there was that 7% drawdown that for some reason, this $590 million with an M, $590 million grant was being reconsidered, related to a bird flu grant. So losing money on negative profits, negative earnings. So what did they say? The contract was awarded in the final days of the Biden administration amid an increase in the number of bird flu cases. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the H5 bird flu is widespread in wild birds and has caused outbreaks in poultry and U.S. dairy cows. It has also led to 70 cases in humans and 1 death in the United States. So, again, we already looked at a couple sites from the CDC. So, I mean, this was the absolute worst numbers as far as what we saw on the CDC. We did also see from them that only 4 people in the United States have ever even had it. I don't know. Kind of odd, kind of strange. But anyways, that would be a big hit for Moderna. Because $590 million is a lot to them. I guess I'll just end this video with a short clip when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was before Congress, and Andy Kim was asking him some questions about would he be in favor of mRNA vaccine technology and be behind that or not, and here's what he said. So thanks for joining me on Premier State Investing. We'll talk to you next time. Notes for our portfolio management course and our work that we put on a quarterly basis on Patreon are available in the notes, as well as links to these articles.
I need to look at all the data. I need to look at safety data and efficacy data, but I'm going to continue research on every kind of vaccine.
You're studying investing. It's great to have you. Thanks for stopping by.